The bread was still warm when Tabitha Ellis's fingers closed around it, and she knew before the baker's shout rang out that her luck had just run dry. She bolted from the back door of the bakery in Telluride, Colorado, clutching the loaf against her chest as her worn boots pounded the dusty street. It was August 1882, and the mountain town was bustling with miners and merchants, all of them too busy with their own affairs to notice one desperate young woman fleeing with stolen goods. At least, that was what she hoped. The baker's furious voice followed her around the corner, but Tabitha knew these alleys better than most. She had been living in them for 3 weeks now, ever since the fever took her mother and left her with 2 younger siblings to feed. Her lungs burned as she ducked behind a water trough, pressing herself against the rough wooden boards of a stable. The bread was crushed against her ribs, probably ruined, but it did not matter as long as it was edible. Samuel and little Grace had not eaten since yesterday morning, and the hollow look in their eyes haunted her more than any nightmare. She waited, counting her heartbeats, listening for pursuit. When none came, she allowed herself a shaky breath and peered around the edge of the trough. That was when she saw him. A man sat astride a chestnut mare not 10 feet away, his dark eyes fixed directly on her hiding spot. He wore the dust-covered clothing of someone who worked the land, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was weathered by sun and wind, probably somewhere in his late 20s, with a strong jaw and an expression that gave away nothing. Tabitha froze like a rabbit in the shadow of a hawk. "You planning to stay behind that trough all day?" His voice was low, measured, without the anger she expected. Tabitha straightened slowly, lifting her chin even as her fingers tightened on the bread. She was 20 years old and had been told she was pretty once, back when she had meat on her bones and her dark blonde hair was not tangled with dust. Now she knew she looked like what she was, desperate, hungry, and one step from falling off the edge of the world. "I am not hurting anyone. Except maybe that baker whose bread you are holding." The man dismounted with an easy grace, looping his horse's reins over a hitching post. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from years of hard physical work. He is still shouting up the street. "My brother and sister are starving." The words came out sharper than she intended, defensive. "I will pay him back when I can. When will that be?" It was not a cruel question, just pragmatic, and somehow that made it worse. Tabitha had no answer. She had been searching for work since they arrived in Telluride, but no one wanted to hire a woman with 2 children in tow and no references. The little money they had left after burying their mother was gone now, spent on a week's rent in a boarding house that had evicted them when the coins ran out. She swallowed hard, hating the sting of tears in her eyes. "I do not know." The man studied her for a long moment, then walked past her toward the bakery. Tabitha tensed, ready to run again, but he simply disappeared around the corner. She heard voices, the baker's angry tone, then the lower rumble of the stranger's response. When he returned a few minutes later, he was carrying a large cloth sack that smelled like heaven. "Where are these siblings of yours?" he asked. Tabitha hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust anyone, especially not a man she did not know. But the smell of fresh bread and what might have been smoked meat made her stomach clench painfully, and she thought of Samuel's thin face and Grace's whimpers in the night. "Why?" "Because I just bought enough food for 4 people, and I have a feeling you all need it more than I do." He held up the sack. "I am Vincent Crane. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside town, and before you ask, I am not in the habit of harming women or children." She wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. Tabitha had learned the hard way that wanting something did not make it real. But Grace was only 6 years old, and Samuel was 8, and they were running out of time. They are in the old miner's shack near the north end of town, the one with the broken door. Vincent nodded as if she had given him directions to somewhere respectable rather than the worst part of Telluride. Show me. The walk through town felt like it took hours, though it could not have been more than 10 minutes. Tabitha led him through alleys and back streets, aware of his solid presence behind her, aware of the weight of the food he carried. Other people moved out of his way instinctively, nodding respectfully. He was someone in this town, she realized, someone who mattered. That made his attention to her situation even more confusing. The shack was exactly as terrible as she remembered leaving it that morning. The door hung crooked on its hinges. The single window was covered with a flour sack, and the whole structure leaned slightly to the left as if considering collapse. Tabitha pushed through the door and found Samuel sitting on the dirt floor with Grace in his lap, both of them looking up with wide, frightened eyes. "Tabby," Samuel's voice cracked. He was small for 8, dark-haired like their father had been, with the kind of serious expression no child should wear. "Who is he?" "Someone who is going to help us eat." Tabitha took the sack from Vincent and knelt beside her siblings. The bag contained not just bread but cheese, dried beef, apples, and even a small jar of preserves. It was more food than they had seen in weeks. Grace made a small sound and reached for an apple with trembling hands. Vincent stood in the doorway, too large for the cramped space, watching as Tabitha divided the food. She made sure Samuel and Grace ate first, breaking off pieces of bread and cheese, telling them to eat slowly so they would not get sick. Only when they were occupied did she allow herself a bite, and the taste of real food nearly made her weep. "How long have you been living like this?" Vincent asked quietly. Tabitha chewed and swallowed, buying time to compose herself. 3 weeks since Mother died. Before that, we had rooms at the boarding house, but only for another week. She had been sick for a month before the end. What about your father? Dead 2 years. Mining accident. The words were automatic now, worn smooth by repetition. Mother brought us here because she heard there was work, but then she caught the fever and Tabitha stopped, glancing at Grace, who was listening even as she ate. "It does not matter now." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving over the shack's interior, taking in the threadbare blankets, the lack of anything resembling comfort or safety. When he spoke again, his voice was firm. "Pack whatever you have. You are all coming with me." Tabitha stared at him. "What?" "My ranch has a guest house. It is empty right now and weatherproofed. You and your brother and sister can stay there." He held up a hand before she could protest. "In exchange, you can help my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. She has been complaining about having too much work since we started expanding the herd. Consider it employment, not charity." "I do not understand." Tabitha's mind was racing, trying to find the trap, the catch, the price she would be expected to pay. "Why would you do this?" Vincent met her eyes steadily. "Because I have been hungry before. Because I know what it is like to have people depend on you when you have got nothing to give them. And because leaving a woman and 2 children in a shack with a broken door does not sit right with me." He gestured to Samuel and Grace. "Pack up. I want to be back at the ranch before dark." There was not much to pack. Everything they owned fit into 2 small bundles, some clothes, their mother's Bible, a tin cup, and a photograph of their parents on their wedding day. Tabitha felt numb as she gathered their possessions, half convinced this was some kind of fever dream. Men like Vincent Crane did not just appear out of nowhere and save desperate families. Things like that did not happen in real life. But Vincent was real, solid, and patient as he waited for them to gather their things. He lifted Grace onto his horse, then helped Samuel up behind her. Tabitha walked alongside, carrying their bundles, still waiting for the moment when this kindness would reveal its true cost. The trail out of Telluride wound through pine forests and across meadows that blazed gold in the late afternoon sun. The San Juan Mountains rose around them, massive and indifferent, beautiful in a way that made Tabitha's chest ache. The Crane Ranch appeared as they crested a rise, and Tabitha caught her breath. It was not a grand place by any means, but it was well maintained and substantial. The main house was built of logs and stone, with a wide porch and real glass windows. There were several outbuildings, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and a smaller house that must be the guest quarters Vincent had mentioned. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and she could see men working near the barn, tending to horses. "It is not much," Vincent said, misreading her silence. "But it is solid. My father built the main house 20 years ago, and I have been working to expand it since he passed." "It is beautiful," Tabitha said honestly. Compared to the shack in Telluride, it looked like a palace. Vincent helped the children down from the horse, and a moment later, a small, wiry woman emerged from the main house. She was Chinese, probably in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she did not suffer fools. This had to be Mrs. Chen. "You brought home strays again, Mrs." Chen said, but her tone was more exasperated than angry. She looked at Tabitha and the children with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen hardship before. "They are half-starved. They will not be for long." Vincent gestured to the guest house. "Can you help get them settled?" "This is Tabitha Ellis and her brother Samuel and sister Grace. They will be staying in the guest house. Tabitha is going to help you with the housework." Mrs. Chen made a noise that might have been approval or skepticism. It was hard to tell. "Come with me," she told Tabitha. "You all need baths and proper food. Vincent, you have work to do. Stop hovering." Vincent looked like he might argue, then simply nodded and headed toward the barn. Tabitha watched him go, still trying to understand what had just happened. "Mrs." Chen clicked her tongue and gestured impatiently for them to follow. The guest house was small but clean, with a real wood floor, a pot-bellied stove, and 2 beds with actual mattresses. There was a table, 2 chairs, and shelves on the wall. To Tabitha, who had been sleeping on dirt, it looked impossibly luxurious. Grace immediately climbed onto one of the beds and bounced experimentally, her eyes huge. "Is this really for us?" Samuel asked, his voice hushed. "For now," Tabitha said, not wanting them to get too attached. She still did not understand Vincent's motivations, and she had learned that good things rarely lasted. Mrs. Chen had them haul water for baths, then provided soap that smelled like lavender and clean clothes that were probably cast-offs but felt like silk compared to their ragged garments. She fed them again, hot stew with vegetables and beef, then shooed the children off to bed despite their protests that it was not fully dark yet. Tabitha sat at the table in the guest house, clean and fed for the first time in weeks, and tried not to cry. "Mrs." Chen sat across from her, hands folded on the table. "Vincent is a good man," she said, "but he expects people to work. If you are staying here, you will earn your keep. I will teach you what needs doing and you will do it. Understood?" "Yes, madam." Tabitha straightened her spine. "I am not afraid of work." "Good." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Your children will be safe here. Vincent does not allow drinking or fighting on his property, and his men know better than to cause trouble. But if anyone bothers you, you tell me or Vincent immediately." "Why is he doing this?" Tabitha asked. "He does not know us. We are strangers." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "Vincent was 15 when his parents died," she said finally. "Cholera took his mother, and his father died a year later from a broken heart," some said. though it was probably his heart giving out from years of hard work. Vincent was left with this ranch, a mountain of debt, and his younger sister to raise. He was hungry that first winter. Proud and stubborn and hungry. A neighbor family took them in, fed them, helped Vincent learn how to manage the ranch properly. He paid them back every cent once he could, but he never forgot what it meant to have someone help when you needed it most. Tabitha absorbed this information, feeling something shift in her chest. Vincent had not just been kind on a whim, he understood. What happened to his sister? Emily married a merchant in Denver 3 years ago. She is doing well, very happy. Mrs. Chen stood, brushing off her skirts. Get some sleep. Tomorrow I will show you what needs doing around here, and it is a long list. After Mrs. Chen left, Tabitha checked on Samuel and Grace one more time. They were curled together on one bed, fast asleep, their faces peaceful in a way she had not seen since before their mother took ill. She covered them with a quilt that was clean and whole, without a single hole or patch, then sat on the edge of the other bed and finally let the tears come. She cried for their mother, for the fear and hunger of the past weeks, for the desperate theft that morning that had led to this improbable salvation. She cried from relief and exhaustion, and the terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, things might actually get better. When the tears stopped, Tabitha lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the window, she could see stars appearing in the darkening sky, bright and cold above the mountains. Somewhere in the main house or the barn, Vincent Crane was going about his evening, probably not thinking twice about the family he had taken in. But Tabitha was thinking about him, about the steadiness in his dark eyes, the matter-of-fact way he had helped without making her feel small or shameful. About the grief he must have carried, losing both parents so young and having to become a man overnight. She fell asleep still thinking about him. And for the first time in weeks, she did not dream of hunger or cold or her mother's fading voice calling her name. Morning came early at the Crane Ranch. Tabitha woke to the sound of roosters and the low of cattle, the sky still gray with pre-dawn light. She dressed quickly in the clean clothes Mrs. Chen had provided, a simple brown skirt and cream blouse that actually fit reasonably well, then checked on Samuel and Grace. They were still sleeping, exhausted from weeks of poor rest and worry. She left them there and made her way to the main house, determined to prove she could be useful. Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen, up to her elbows in flour. She glanced up when Tabitha entered. "Good. You are an early riser. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam. Not fancy, but I can manage most things." "Fancy is not what ranch hands need. They need quantity and substance." Mrs. Chen gestured to a side of bacon hanging near the larder. "Start slicing that. The men will be in for breakfast in half an hour and they eat like locusts." Tabitha set to work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of meal preparation. As she cooked, Mrs. Chen explained the household routine. Vincent employed 6 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. They ate breakfast and dinner in the main house's dining room, which meant cooking for 8 people twice a day. There was also cleaning, laundry, mending, helping with the kitchen garden, and dozens of other tasks that kept the ranch running smoothly. "Vincent eats with the men," Mrs. Chen said as she stirred a pot of oatmeal. "He is not one for putting on airs. His father was the same way. A working ranch needs a working owner," he always said. The ranch hands filed in as the sun rose, dusty and tired looking despite the early hour. They were a mixed group. 2 were Mexican. One was a freed slave named Marcus who had the biggest hands Tabitha had ever seen, and the others were white men of varying ages. They nodded respectfully to Mrs. Chen and eyed Tabitha with curiosity but no hostility. Vincent came in last, and Tabitha was struck again by his presence. In the morning light, she could see he had not shaved yet, dark stubble shadowing his jaw. His shirt sleeves were already rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. When his gaze found hers across the kitchen, something in her chest fluttered strangely. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "I see you have put Tabitha to work already." "Someone has to help me feed this army," Mrs. Chen retorted. "She has a good hand with bacon. Sit down before it gets cold." Breakfast was a loud, companionable affair. The men ate enormous quantities of food while discussing the day's work. Fences to be mended, cattle to be moved to higher pasture, a new foal that needed attention. Vincent listened more than he spoke, but when he gave an opinion or instruction, everyone paid attention. It was clear he had earned his men's respect through more than just ownership of the land. After breakfast, the men dispersed to their tasks. Vincent lingered in the kitchen doorway. "How did you and the children sleep?" "Better than we have in months," Tabitha admitted. "Mr. Crane, I do not know how to thank you." "Vincent," he corrected. "And you can thank me by taking good care of yourself and those kids. Mrs. Chen, do not work her too hard the first few days. She needs to recover her strength." "I know how to manage a household," Mrs. Chen said tartly, but there was warmth in her eyes. "Go tend your cattle and stop fussing." Vincent left, and Tabitha found herself watching through the window as he strode across the yard to the barn, his movements efficient and purposeful. Mrs. Chen made a small sound that might have been amusement. "He is only 28, you know," she said, "in case you were wondering." Tabitha felt heat rise to her face. "I was not, of course not." Mrs. Chen handed her a basket of eggs. "These need washing, and then you should check on your brother and sister. Bring them to the kitchen when they wake. Growing children need a proper breakfast." The days fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and wonderful. Tabitha worked alongside Mrs. Chen from dawn until after dinner, learning the patterns of the ranch household. Samuel and Grace were transformed by regular meals and safety. Grace's laugh returned, bright and infectious, and Samuel started exploring the ranch with the cautious wonder of a child who had forgotten how to play. Vincent put him to work with light chores, teaching him how to care for chickens and collect eggs, treating the boy with a patient respect that made Tabitha's throat tight. Tabitha herself was changing too. The hollow look faded from her face as she gained weight. Her hair, properly washed and brushed, proved to be a rich honey blonde that caught the sunlight. Mrs. Chen found her better-fitting clothes, including a dark blue dress that made her gray eyes look almost silver. She caught Vincent looking at her more than once, his expression thoughtful, and each time her pulse quickened in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. She was falling for him. It was foolish and dangerous and probably hopeless, but she could not seem to help it. The way he spoke gently to Grace when the little girl was frightened by a thunderstorm. The way he showed Samuel how to whistle using a blade of grass, his large hands patient as the boy fumbled. The way he sometimes caught Tabitha's eye across the dinner table and smiled, small and private, as if they shared a secret. 3 weeks after they arrived at the ranch, Tabitha was hanging laundry when Vincent approached, leading a gray mare. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I learned when I was young," Tabitha said, "but it has been years. This is Silver. She is gentle as a lamb." Vincent held out the reins. "I thought you might like to see more of the ranch. Mrs. Chen says you have been working yourself ragged and you could use a break." Tabitha glanced back at the house. "I should not leave the work. Mrs. Chen sent me to fetch you," Vincent interrupted. "Her orders, not mine, though I agree with her." It felt decadent to leave the laundry half-finished and climb onto Silver's back. But Tabitha could not suppress a smile as Vincent mounted his chestnut mare and led them out of the yard. They rode through pastures dotted with cattle, then up into the foothills where pine trees grew thick, and the air smelled like resin and wild herbs. The San Juan Mountains rose around them in shades of gray and purple, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the August heat. "It is beautiful here," Tabitha said as they paused at a ridge overlooking the ranch. From this height, she could see the whole property laid out below. The house and outbuildings, the pastures, the stream that cut through the eastern edge of the land, silver in the sunlight. "My father used to bring me up here when I was a boy," Vincent said. "He would say that if you can see your land from above, you can see what it needs, where the fences are failing, where the grass is thin, where the water runs." He looked at her, his expression serious. "It is a good reminder that nothing takes care of itself. You have to pay attention, put in the work, fix things before they break if you can." "Is that why you helped us?" Tabitha asked. "Because you saw we were breaking?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I helped because I could," he said finally. "And because I wanted to. Is that all right?" "It is more than all right." Tabitha's voice was soft. "It is everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching hawks circle over the valley. Then Vincent turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Tabitha, I need you to know that you and the children are welcome here as long as you want to stay, not just as workers, as part of this place. I know you have been through hell, and I do not want you to feel obligated or pressured into anything, but if you want to stay, I want you to stay, all of you." Tabitha's heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Why?" "Because this place is better with you in it," Vincent said simply. "Because Samuel is learning to be a boy again, and Grace is smiling, and Mrs. Chen actually sings sometimes now when you are in the kitchen. Because I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is whether I will see you at breakfast. Because—" he stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Because I have not felt this way about anyone before, and it scares the hell out of me, but I do not want it to stop." Tabitha could not speak. Her throat had closed up entirely, and her eyes were burning with tears she refused to let fall. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her face with one calloused hand. "I know it has only been 3 weeks," he said. "I know you probably need time, and that is fine. I can be patient, but I wanted you to know. I care about you, Tabitha, more than I probably should." "I care about you too," Tabitha whispered. "I have tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude, that I was confusing kindness with something else. But I think about you all the time, when I am working, when I am falling asleep, when I wake up. You are always there." Vincent's thumb brushed her cheekbone, achingly gentle. "Can I kiss you?" Tabitha nodded, not trusting her voice, and then his lips were on hers, and nothing else mattered. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might shatter. But when she leaned into him, her hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart pounding, he deepened it, his fingers sliding into her hair. It was unlike anything Tabitha had ever experienced. Her one previous kiss, years ago with a boy in her hometown, had been clumsy and forgettable. This was heat and hunger and sweetness all at once, a promise and a question and an answer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the first moment I saw you behind that water trough, looking like you would fight the whole world to protect your family." Tabitha laughed, shaky and breathless. "I looked like a mess. You looked fierce. You looked like someone worth knowing." Vincent pulled back slightly, his hand still cupping her face. "Stay with me, Tabitha, not as an employee, not as someone passing through. Stay and build something here. You and Samuel and Grace. Let me be part of your family and you be part of mine. Are you asking me to marry you?" Tabitha's voice came out as barely a whisper, Eventually, if you will have me." Vincent smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and beautiful. "But for now, I am just asking you to give this a chance, to give us a chance. No pressure, no obligations, just see where it goes." Tabitha thought about the weeks since they arrived at the ranch. The safety, the kindness, the way Vincent treated Samuel and Grace as if they mattered, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, the way her heart felt too big for her chest whenever he was near. "I want to," she said. "I am scared, but I want to try." "Scared is all right," Vincent said. "I am scared too, but maybe we can be scared together." They rode back to the ranch slowly, their horses walking side by side, hands occasionally brushing as they talked. Tabitha learned that Vincent had been educated by a teacher in Telluride, that he loved to read but rarely had time for it, that his favorite meal was still the simple stew his mother used to make. She told him about her childhood in Kansas, about her father's laugh and her mother's singing voice, about the year the crops failed and they had to sell everything to survive. They talked until the sun was low in the sky, and Mrs. Chen was probably wondering what had happened to them. When they returned, Samuel and Grace ran out to meet them, Grace shrieking with delight when Vincent scooped her up and set her on his shoulders. Samuel walked beside Tabitha, chattering about how Marcus had let him help shoe a horse and how he had not even been scared when the horse stomped its foot. Mrs. Chen stood on the porch, arms crossed, but Tabitha could see the hint of a smile on her face. That night, after the children were asleep in the guest house, Tabitha stood on the small porch and looked up at the stars. She heard footsteps and turned to find Vincent approaching, a lantern in his hand. "Could not sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about?" Tabitha hugged her arms around herself. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to turn out to be a dream, or for you to change your mind, or for some disaster to take it all away." Vincent set the lantern on the porch railing and stepped closer. "I am not going to change my mind. And this is not a dream, though I will admit I have dreamed about you more than I should probably confess." His smile was crooked, self-deprecating. "As for disasters, we will deal with them together if they come. That is what people do when they care about each other." Tabitha reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. His palm was warm and rough against hers, solid and real. "I have spent so long just trying to survive," she admitted. "I do not know how to do this, how to be happy, how to let myself want things. We will figure it out together." Vincent squeezed her hand gently. "One day at a time, no rush, no expectations, just us, taking it as it comes." They stood in the darkness, hands clasped, while the night sounds of the ranch rose around them. Cattle lowing softly, the murmur of voices from the bunkhouse, an owl calling from the pine trees. Tabitha leaned her head against Vincent's shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, leather and pine and clean sweat. For the first time since her mother died, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she belonged. The following weeks were some of the happiest Tabitha could remember. She continued working with Mrs. Chen, but now there was lightness to her days, a sense of joy in the simple routines. Vincent courted her in quiet ways. Wildflowers left on the guest house porch, a book of poetry he thought she might like, his hand at the small of her back as he guided her through a doorway. They stole moments together when they could, conversations in the barn while he worked, walks after dinner when the light turned golden and soft. Samuel thrived under Vincent's mentorship. The boy followed him around like a shadow, soaking up everything Vincent taught him about ranching, about horses and cattle, about reading the weather and the land. Vincent was patient and firm in equal measure, treating Samuel with a respect that built the boy's confidence day by day. Grace attached herself to Mrs. Chen, learning to cook and becoming the old woman's constant companion. The ranch hands teased Vincent gently about his new family, but it was clear they approved. In September, as the aspens began to turn gold on the mountainsides, Vincent took Tabitha into Telluride for supplies. It was her first time back in town since he had found her stealing bread, and she walked the streets with her head high, clean and well-fed, and on the arm of a man who mattered. They passed the bakery, and on impulse, Tabitha stopped. "I want to pay him back," she said, "for the bread I stole." Vincent did not argue. They entered the bakery together, and the baker looked up from his counter with widening eyes. Tabitha placed coins on the scarred wood, enough to cover the bread and then some. "For what I took in August. I am sorry for stealing, and I am grateful for your patience." The baker, a stout German man with flour permanently dusted on his apron, stared at the money, then at Tabitha, then at Vincent standing protectively behind her. "You are the girl who ran from my shop." "Yes, sir, I was desperate and wrong. It will not happen again." The baker's stern expression softened slightly. "You have found work, then?" "I work for Mr. Crane," Tabitha said, allowing herself a small smile, "at his ranch. Vincent Crane is a good man." The baker pushed a few of the coins back across the counter. "This is too much. Take it back." "Keep it," Vincent said, "for the trouble she caused." They left with a fresh loaf of bread that the baker insisted they take, and Tabitha felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Vincent squeezed her hand as they walked to the general store. That took courage. "I could not live with owing him," Tabitha said. "Even if he did not know about it, I knew." At the general store, Vincent bought fabric for new dresses for both Tabitha and Grace, as well as clothes for Samuel, who was growing like a weed. He also bought peppermint sticks for the children and a delicate silver comb for Tabitha, who protested that it was too much. "Let me spoil you a little," Vincent said. "Please, it makes me happy." How could she argue with that? Tabitha accepted the gifts with grace, her heart full to bursting. On the ride back to the ranch, she sat close to Vincent on the wagon seat, their shoulders touching, comfortable in a way that spoke of growing intimacy and trust. That evening, after dinner, Vincent asked Tabitha to walk with him. They strolled away from the buildings, out to the edge of the property where a creek burbled over smooth stones. The sky was ablaze with sunset, orange and pink and deep purple. Vincent stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I know I said no pressure and no rush," he began, "but I have been thinking, and I need you to know where I stand. I love you, Tabitha. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from that first day when you stood behind that water trough looking terrified but defiant. I want to marry you. I want Samuel and Grace to be my children in every way that matters. I want to build a life with you, grow old with you, face whatever comes with you by my side." He paused, searching her face. "I am not asking yet, not until you are ready, but I wanted you to know. My intentions are serious. You are not a passing fancy or a rescue project. You are the woman I want to spend my life with." Tabitha could not speak past the lump in her throat. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she saw a panic flash in Vincent's eyes. "If it is too soon, if I am pushing too hard," he started, but she cut him off by throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him with all the feeling she could not put into words. When they broke apart, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you too," she said. "I have been trying not to say it because it seemed impossible that this could be real. But I love you, Vincent Crane. I love your kindness and your strength, and the way you treat my brother and sister like they matter. I love how hard you work and how patient you are, and the way you look at me like I am something special. I love you so much it terrifies me." Vincent kissed her again, deep and thorough, his arms tight around her. When he finally pulled back, he was grinning like a fool. So when you are ready, if I were to ask you to marry me, you might say yes. I might, Tabitha teased, then relented at the hopeful look on his face. I would. Absolutely I would. But I want Samuel and Grace to be comfortable first. I want them to feel secure here, to know this is really their home. Can you give me until the end of the year? 3 more months. I would wait 3 years if that is what you needed, Vincent said. 3 months is nothing. Besides, it will give me time to build you a proper house. The guest house is fine for now, but I want you to have something better, something that is truly yours. Ours, Tabitha corrected. If we are doing this, everything is ours, together. Vincent kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. Ours, he agreed. I like the sound of that. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, and when they entered the yard, Mrs. Chen was sitting on the main house porch shelling peas. She took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. About time, she muttered. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever. The next months passed in a blur of work and preparation. Vincent began construction on an addition to the main house, rooms that would belong to Tabitha and the children, with windows facing the mountains and a large stone fireplace. The ranch hands pitched in during their free time, and the structure grew steadily. Samuel helped where he could, handing tools and learning the basics of carpentry. Grace made a game of collecting the wood shavings, declaring she was going to make a nest for the barn cats. Tabitha threw herself into learning everything she could about managing a ranch household. Mrs. Chen taught her to preserve vegetables for winter, to render lard, to make soap and candles. She learned which herbs grew wild on the property and could be used for medicine or cooking. She learned how to manage the household accounts, though Vincent insisted she did not need to worry about money. She wanted to anyway, wanted to be a true partner to him in every sense. In late October, the first snow fell, light flurries that dusted the mountains and made Grace squeal with delight. Vincent took them all into the high pastures in the wagon to see the aspens in their full golden glory before winter stripped them bare. They had a picnic in a meadow, the 5 of them. Vincent, Tabitha, Samuel, Grace, and Mrs. Chen, who had been persuaded to take an afternoon off. Vincent taught the children to skip stones on a pond, and Mrs. Chen told stories about growing up in China, tales of dragons and clever girls that held Grace spellbound. Tabitha watched Vincent with her siblings and felt her heart expand until it ached. This was family. This was what home was supposed to feel like. Samuel caught her eye and grinned, his face alight with happiness, and she knew he felt it too. In November, Vincent asked Tabitha to help him with the ranch's bookkeeping. They sat together at the desk in his study, heads bent over ledgers, and she was struck by how much trust this represented. He was showing her everything: the ranch's income and expenses, the debts still owed, the plans for expansion, treating her as his equal, his partner. When she pointed out an error in his calculations that would have saved him money on a feed order, he kissed her temple and declared she was invaluable. As November turned to December, Tabitha realized she did not want to wait until the end of the year. She was ready now. Samuel and Grace were settled and happy. Vincent loved her and she loved him, and there was no reason to delay except her own lingering fears. One evening, as they stood in the partially completed addition to the house, examining the progress, she turned to him. "Ask me," she said. Vincent looked confused. "Ask you what?" "You know what?" Tabitha smiled up at him, her heart racing. "Ask me the question you have been waiting to ask." Understanding dawned in Vincent's eyes, followed by such open joy that Tabitha felt tears spring to her own eyes. He took both her hands, his grip warm and sure. "Tabitha Ellis, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and a father to Samuel and Grace? Will you build a life with me here on this ranch for all the years we are given?" "Yes," Tabitha said, her voice strong and clear. Yes to all of it. I will marry you, Vincent Crane, and I will love you for the rest of my life. Vincent let out a whoop of pure happiness and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. He set her down and kissed her thoroughly, his hands cradling her face like she was something infinitely precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he pulled a small box from his pocket. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment, he admitted, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire. It was my mother's. If you do not like it, we can get something else. It is perfect, Tabitha interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. I love it. She held out her hand and Vincent slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, glinting in the lantern light. They told the others at dinner that night. Mrs. Chen declared she knew it all along and started planning the wedding feast immediately. Samuel looked between Tabitha and Vincent with wide eyes. Does this mean Vincent will be our brother? More like a father, Vincent said carefully, looking at Samuel. If that is all right with you. I know I cannot replace your real father and I would not try. But I would like to be someone you can rely on, someone who is always in your corner. Samuel considered this seriously, then nodded. I think that would be good. Can I still call you Vincent? You can call me whatever feels right, Vincent said. Vincent Pa, whatever you are comfortable with. Grace, who had been listening with her usual grave attention, piped up. So Tabby is going to be your wife. That is right, Tabitha confirmed. Grace thought about this, then declared, good. That means we get to stay forever. She climbed into Vincent's lap as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I like it here. The chickens know my name now. Everyone laughed, and the tension broke. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. They would marry in late December, a small ceremony in the ranch house with just family and the ranch hands. Vincent would ride into Telluride to find a minister. Mrs. Chen would make the food. Tabitha would wear a new dress, pale blue, because she had always loved that color. It would be simple and perfect, exactly what they both wanted. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy. The addition to the house was completed, the rooms furnished with a large bed Vincent had ordered from Denver, a wardrobe, a desk, and toys for the children. Tabitha moved their belongings from the guest house, marveling at how quickly this place had become home. Mrs. Chen sewed her wedding dress, pale blue wool with cream lace at the collar and cuffs, practical and beautiful. Vincent gave her a string of pearls that had been his mother's, to wear with the dress. Christmas came, and they celebrated with a feast and small gifts. Vincent gave Samuel a pocket knife and taught him how to use it safely. He gave Grace a porcelain doll with a painted face, and she clutched it like treasure. For Tabitha, he had commissioned a leather-bound journal, the pages blank and waiting. For your thoughts, he said, or recipes or anything you want. I know you used to keep a diary before things got hard. I thought you might want to start again. Tabitha gave him a new hat she had bought in Telluride, sturdy and warm for winter riding. For the children, she had made new scarves and mittens. Mrs. Chen received a shawl Tabitha had knitted in secret, working on it late at night when everyone else was asleep. They sat around the fire in the main room. The tree Vincent and Samuel had cut decorated with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments Grace had made. And Tabitha thought she had never been happier. The wedding took place on December 28th, with snow falling softly outside the windows. The main room was decorated with pine boughs and candles, filling the air with the scent of resin and beeswax. Tabitha wore her blue dress and pearls, her hair loose around her shoulders the way Vincent liked it. Samuel stood beside Vincent, solemn in new clothes, while Grace scattered dried flower petals and Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The minister from Telluride, a kindly man named Reverend Morris, led them through the traditional vows. When Vincent said, "I do," his voice was strong and sure. When Tabitha echoed the words, she meant them with every fiber of her being. Vincent kissed her to applause and cheers from the ranch hands, who had cleaned up and were packed into the room grinning like fools. The feast afterward was magnificent. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with roasted turkey, ham, potatoes, vegetables, pies, and a cake that made Grace's eyes go wide. There was music from a fiddle that Marcus played with surprising skill, and dancing that lasted until late in the night. Tabitha danced with Vincent, with Samuel, with each of the ranch hands, her face aching from smiling so much. When the party finally wound down and the ranch hands departed for the bunkhouse, Vincent carried a sleeping Grace to her new room while Tabitha walked with Samuel. They tucked the children into their beds, Grace with her doll and Samuel with his new pocket knife carefully placed on the bedside table. Tabitha kissed them both good night, her heart full. In their own room, the one Vincent had built for them, Tabitha stood by the window looking out at the snow-covered ranch. Vincent came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "That 6 months ago I was stealing bread and sleeping in a shack with a broken door. And now I am here, married to you, in a beautiful house with my brother and sister safe and warm. It feels like a miracle." Vincent turned her gently to face him, his hands on her waist. "You are the miracle," he said. "You and your courage and your love for your family. All I did was recognize something extraordinary when I saw it." Tabitha reached up to cup his face, her thumb tracing his jawline. "We saved each other," she said. "You gave us a home and we gave you a family. That is a fair trade, I think." "The best trade I ever made," Vincent agreed, and then he was kissing her and the rest of the world fell away. They made love for the first time that night, tender and nervous and sweet. Vincent was patient, attentive to every response, every sound she made. Tabitha had been afraid she would be too frightened, too scarred by the hardships of the past months to enjoy this. But with Vincent, she felt safe enough to be vulnerable, to let herself feel pleasure without fear. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, listening to the wind outside and the crackle of the dying fire. "I love you," Vincent whispered into her hair. "I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too," Tabitha replied, her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "Always." The winter passed in a haze of contentment. Tabitha adjusted to being a wife, to sharing a bed and a life with Vincent. They learned each other's rhythms, the small compromises and adjustments that marriage required. Vincent learned that Tabitha was not a morning person and needed coffee before conversation. Tabitha learned that Vincent liked to plan his day while he shaved, talking through his schedule aloud. They learned to read each other's moods, to know when to give space and when to offer comfort. Samuel and Grace called Vincent Pa more often than not now, and he responded with the same patient affection he showed in everything. He taught Samuel to ride properly, started him reading from the ranch's small library, showed him how to track animals in the snow. Grace followed Mrs. Chen everywhere, learning to cook and clean and manage a household, already showing signs of the capable woman she would become. In March, Tabitha realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then told Mrs. Chen, who smiled knowingly and felt her abdomen with practiced hands. 2 months, maybe, the old woman said. You should tell Vincent. Tabitha found him in the barn, checking on a mare who was due to foal soon. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a smile that still made her stomach flutter. "What brings you out here? I thought you were working on the mending. I needed to talk to you." Tabitha stepped closer, suddenly nervous. "I have news." Vincent's expression shifted to concern. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong." Tabitha took his hands, looking up into his face. "I am with child, Vincent. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Vincent just stared at her, processing. Then joy spread across his face like sunrise, bright and warm and beautiful. He let out a shout of pure happiness and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. "A baby! Tabitha, we are having a baby," she laughed, dizzy and delighted by his reaction. "I take it you are happy about this." Happy does not even begin to cover it. Vincent set her down carefully, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "Are you all right? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" "I am fine," Tabitha assured him. "Mrs. Chen says everything seems normal. The baby should come in October if her calculations are correct." Vincent kissed her, gentle and reverent. "A baby," he murmured against her lips. "Our baby. God, Tabitha, I did not think I could be happier than I already was, but this—" His voice cracked with emotion. "They told Samuel and Grace that evening." Samuel looked thoughtful, then asked if this meant he was going to be a big brother like he was to Grace. When Tabitha confirmed it, he nodded seriously and declared he would teach the baby everything he knew. Grace wanted to know if it would be a boy or girl, and when Tabitha said they would not know until the baby was born, she announced she hoped for a sister because boys were sometimes silly. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Tabitha felt sick in the mornings for a few weeks, but it passed. By summer, her belly was round and full, and Vincent was absurdly protective, not wanting her to lift anything heavy or work too hard. Mrs. Chen shooed him away regularly, reminding him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and Tabitha was strong and healthy. In late July, a traveling photographer came through Telluride, and Vincent insisted on having a family portrait made. They dressed in their best clothes and stood in front of the ranch house. Vincent with his hand on Tabitha's shoulder, her hand resting on her swollen belly, Samuel standing proud and straight, Grace holding her doll. When the finished photograph arrived weeks later, Tabitha cried at seeing them all together, a real family captured forever in silver and light. August brought the heat, and Tabitha felt huge and ungainly. Vincent told her she was beautiful every day, running his hands over her belly to feel the baby kick. They had long conversations about names, settling on James if it was a boy, after Vincent's father, and Clara if it was a girl, after Tabitha's mother. Samuel and Grace added their own suggestions, some reasonable and some absurd, making everyone laugh. In September, as the aspens began to turn again, marking a full year since Vincent had proposed, Tabitha went into labor. It was late afternoon, and Vincent had just come in from the north pasture. Tabitha was in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen when her water broke, and the pains started in earnest. Mrs. Chen sent one of the ranch hands for the doctor in Telluride, then helped Tabitha to the bedroom. Vincent was beside himself. He held Tabitha's hand through the contractions, looking nearly as pale as she felt. Mrs. Chen had delivered babies before and was calm and efficient, but she was relieved when the doctor arrived an hour later. The labor was long, stretching into the night. Vincent stayed with Tabitha the entire time, whispering encouragement, wiping her face with cool cloths, never leaving her side even when she crushed his hand hard enough to leave bruises. Finally, as dawn was breaking on a cool September morning, the baby came with a lusty cry that filled the room. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant on Tabitha's chest. "Healthy lungs on this one." Tabitha looked down at her son, this tiny perfect person she and Vincent had created, and felt love so fierce it stole her breath. Vincent was crying openly, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger, his face full of wonder. "James," he said hoarsely. "James Vincent Crane. Hello, son." Samuel and Grace were allowed in once Tabitha was cleaned up and settled. They approached the bed cautiously, eyes huge. Grace reached out to touch the baby's soft, dark hair. "He is so small." "You were even smaller when you were born," Tabitha told her. "He will grow." Samuel watched his new brother with serious eyes. "I will teach him things," he said, "when he is big enough. I will teach him to ride and to track and everything Pa taught me." "I know you will," Vincent said, ruffling Samuel's hair. "You will be a great big brother." The ranch celebrated the birth with a feast, the ranch hands passing around cigars Vincent had bought in anticipation. Mrs. Chen made a special soup for Tabitha, full of herbs and rich broth to help her recover. For days, the house was full of visitors bringing gifts and well wishes: blankets, clothes, a carved wooden horse, a silver rattle. Tabitha spent the first weeks in a haze of sleeplessness and joy. James was a good baby, healthy and hungry, and she loved every moment even when she was exhausted. Vincent was a devoted father, getting up with her in the night, walking James when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with their son made Tabitha fall in love with him all over again. As autumn deepened into winter, and James grew from a tiny newborn into a plump, alert baby, Tabitha reflected on how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been stealing bread, desperate and afraid. Now she was a wife and mother, living in a beautiful home with a man who loved her and children who were thriving. Sometimes it still felt like a dream. One evening in December, with snow falling outside and the whole family gathered around the fire, Vincent pulled her close. James was asleep in the cradle Vincent had built, Grace was playing with her doll, and Samuel was reading aloud from a book about explorers. Mrs. Chen sat in her rocking chair, knitting. It was warm and peaceful, the very picture of domestic contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked quietly. "That I am exactly where I am supposed to be," Tabitha said. "With all of you, this is home." Vincent kissed her temple. "This has been home since the day you arrived. I just had to convince you to stay." "You did not have to work very hard," Tabitha teased. "I was halfway in love with you after a week." "Only halfway. I was completely gone in 3 days." Vincent's arm tightened around her. "Best thing I ever did, buying that bread from the baker. Best investment I ever made." Tabitha laughed softly. "I am glad I was terrible at being a thief. I am glad I was in the right place at the right time." Vincent looked at their family, his expression content. "I am glad for all of it, every moment that brought us here." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. James learned to walk, then to run, keeping Samuel and Grace busy chasing after him. When he was 3, another baby arrived, a daughter they named Clara after Tabitha's mother. She had Vincent's dark eyes and Tabitha's blonde hair, a perfect combination. Grace was devoted to her baby sister, carrying her around whenever allowed, playing with her endlessly. Samuel grew into a tall, capable young man. At 18, he was Vincent's right hand on the ranch, trusted with increasing responsibility. He had Vincent's steady temperament and Tabitha's quick mind, and everyone agreed he would make a fine rancher someday. Vincent began talking about expanding the ranch to include land to the north, with an eye toward Samuel running part of it when he was ready. Grace blossomed into a lovely young woman, smart and capable, with her mother's determination and her father's kindness. She had suitors by the time she was 16, young men from town and neighboring ranches, but she laughingly declared she was in no hurry to marry. She wanted to see something of the world first, maybe even go to Denver or San Francisco. Mrs. Chen aged gracefully, eventually retiring from heavy work, but remaining an essential part of the household. She spent her days teaching Clara to cook, tending the garden, and dispensing wisdom to anyone who would listen. The ranch hands came and went over the years, but several stayed long-term, becoming like extended family. Vincent and Tabitha's love deepened with time rather than fading. They still stole moments together when they could, still made each other laugh, still desired each other with a passion that showed no signs of diminishing. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent took Tabitha back to the ridge where he had first kissed her, and they renewed their vows privately, just the two of them and the mountains and sky. "I would do it all again," Tabitha said as they stood overlooking the ranch. "Every hard moment, every fear, every struggle, if it all led here to you, to this life, I would do it all again without hesitation. I would find you faster next time," Vincent said. "I would buy that bread from the baker every day until I saw you. I would not waste a single moment." Tabitha leaned into him, comfortable and content. Below them, the ranch sprawled across the valley, larger now than when she first arrived. New buildings had been added, more pastures cleared, the herd expanded. But the heart of it remained the same. The main house where their family gathered, the barn where Vincent still worked alongside his men, the land itself stretching away toward the mountains. "This is our legacy," Vincent said quietly. "Not just the ranch, but what we have built here. A place where people are safe, where family matters, where hard work and kindness are valued. That is what I want to leave behind." "We will," Tabitha assured him. "Look at Samuel and Grace and James and Clara. They know what matters. They know what a real home looks like. They will carry that forward." They stood together in the fading light, two people who had found each other when both needed saving and had built something lasting from that unlikely beginning. The story of how they met, the stolen bread and the chance encounter, became family legend. They told it to their children, and later their grandchildren, as proof that kindness matters, that generosity is never wasted, that love can grow from the most unlikely circumstances. Years later, when they were old and gray, Vincent and Tabitha still walked out to that ridge on special occasions. Their children were grown with families of their own. Samuel ran the ranch with his wife and 4 children. Grace had married a merchant and lived in Denver but visited often with her 2 daughters. James worked as a horse trainer, traveling between ranches but always returning home. Clara taught school in Telluride, living in town during the week and coming to the ranch on weekends. Mrs. Chen had passed peacefully in her sleep at 83, and they had buried her on the ridge under the aspens, her favorite spot. The ranch employed 15 men now, and the Crane name was respected throughout Colorado. But Vincent and Tabitha never forgot where they started, never took their good fortune for granted. On a crisp autumn afternoon in 1907, 25 years after that fateful day in Telluride, Tabitha and Vincent sat on the porch of the main house watching their youngest grandchild, a spirited girl named Rose, chase chickens around the yard. James's son was teaching Clara's daughter to rope a fence post. Samuel's twins were helping their father repair a section of barn roof. It was chaos and noise and laughter, exactly as a family should be. "We did all right," Vincent said, his hand finding Tabitha's as naturally as breathing. "We did better than all right," Tabitha corrected. She was 45 now, still beautiful to Vincent, her blonde hair threaded with silver, her face lined but glowing with contentment. "We did magnificently." Vincent raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I love you, Mrs. Crane. Just as much as I did that day on the ridge, maybe more. Definitely more," Tabitha said. "Love grows when you tend it properly. You taught me that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their family, feeling the warmth of the autumn sun on their faces. Tabitha thought about that desperate young woman who had stolen bread to feed her siblings, who had been terrified and hopeless and ready to fight the world. She thought about the rancher who had shown mercy when he could have shown judgment, who had offered help when he could have walked away. Two people brought together by circumstance and need, who had chosen to build something beautiful. That was the real miracle, she thought. Not that Vincent had saved her, though he had. Not that she had given him a family, though she had done that too. The miracle was that they had chosen each other, day after day, year after year, through hardships and joys, through the mundane and the extraordinary. They had chosen love, and that choice had made all the difference. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Vincent pulled Tabitha close. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. Their grandchildren's laughter rang out across the yard, and somewhere in the house, she could hear Samuel's wife singing while she prepared dinner. This was happiness, Tabitha thought. This messy, loud, beautiful life they had created. This family, this home, this love that had started with stolen bread and a moment of compassion and had grown into something extraordinary. She closed her eyes, feeling grateful for every moment, every choice, every day that had brought her here. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent. "For what?" His voice rumbled in his chest, comforting and familiar. "For seeing me that day, for helping us, for loving us, for everything." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a rancher who could not mind his own business. Thank you for building this life with me." They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands and watching their world, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The ranch would endure, passing to Samuel and his children and beyond. The story of the rancher who found her stealing bread would be told for generations, a reminder that kindness could change lives, that love could heal wounds, that family was not just blood but choice. Tabitha Ellis Crane had been saved by Vincent's generosity, but she had saved him too, filling his empty house with laughter and his lonely heart with love. They had rescued each other, and in doing so, had built something that would last long after they were gone. That was their true legacy. Not the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the love they had nurtured and the family they had created, and the example they set of what it meant to choose compassion over judgment, generosity over selfishness, love over fear. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, they finally went inside to join their family for dinner. The table was crowded and chaotic, multiple conversations happening at once, children squirming and adults laughing and food being passed in every direction. Vincent caught Tabitha's eye across the noise and smiled, that same warm smile that had made her heart flutter all those years ago. She smiled back, love and gratitude flowing through her like a river. This was what mattered. This moment, this family, this love that had started with a loaf of stolen bread and grown into something magnificent. Tabitha looked around the table at all the faces she loved, at the children and grandchildren who existed, because a rancher had shown mercy to a desperate woman one August day. And she knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every hardship, every moment of fear had been worth it. They had led her here, to this table, to this family, to this man who had been her salvation and her partner and the love of her life. Outside, the Colorado night was cold and clear, stars brilliant above the mountains. Inside, the Crane house was warm and bright, filled with the sounds of family and the smell of good food and the unmistakable feeling of home. And in the midst of it all, Vincent and Tabitha sat together, hands clasped beneath the table, hearts full, knowing they had been blessed beyond measure and grateful for every moment of the life they had built together.